the Iran-Iraq War that never really ended. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein ordered his tanks to roll into Iran, convinced that a swift, decisive victory was just weeks away. He saw a nation in chaos, weakened by a recent revolution, and believed he could seize valuable territory and establish himself as the undisputed leader of the Arab world. He thought he was starting a war he could easily win. What he actually did was ignite a firestorm that would consume the Middle East for 8 years, claiming over 1 million lives and unleashing forces that continue to burn across the region to this very day. This wasn't a simple border skirmish over the Shatt al-Arab waterway, although that was the official pretext. It was a profound, existential clash between two men and their irreconcilable ideologies. On one side stood Saddam Hussein, the champion of secular, pan-Arab nationalism, ruling over a Shia-majority Iraq with an iron fist. On the other was Ayatollah Khomeini, the charismatic leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, who openly called for the overthrow of secular regimes across the Middle East, including Saddam's. Khomeini's message resonated deeply with Iraq's repressed Shia population, posing a direct threat to Saddam's power. For Saddam, the invasion was a preemptive strike to crush a revolutionary threat. For Khomeini, it became a holy defense, a sacred duty to protect the Islamic Revolution from an aggressor. The war quickly morphed from a calculated land grab into a bitter ideological crusade. What followed was a descent into a nightmare that seemed torn from the darkest pages of history. The rapid advance Saddam had envisioned ground to a halt, and the conflict devolved into a brutal war of attrition. The front lines became a hellscape of trenches, barbed wire, and machine gun nests, eerily reminiscent of the senseless slaughter of World War I. Iraq, desperate to break the stalemate, unleashed chemical weapons, deploying mustard gas and nerve agents against Iranian soldiers and even its own Kurdish citizens with horrifying impunity, while the international community largely turned a blind eye. Iran, facing a technologically superior enemy, responded with a different kind of weapon: human lives. The regime sent wave after wave of barely trained volunteers, many of them teenagers and even young boys, charging across minefields and into the teeth of Iraqi defenses. These human wave attacks became a symbol of the war's sheer fanaticism and disregard for life. The horror wasn't confined to the battlefield. The conflict escalated into the War of the Cities, as both sides launched missile attacks against each other's population centers. The sirens would wail in Tehran and Baghdad, sending civilians scrambling for shelter, never knowing if the next explosion would tear through their home or marketplace. The economic toll was catastrophic. Both nations, rich with oil, saw their economies crumble under the immense weight of the war effort. Infrastructure was destroyed, development ground to a halt, and an entire generation of young men was sacrificed. Yet, despite the unimaginable cost, neither side could achieve a decisive victory. The front lines barely moved for years, locked in a bloody stalemate where the only certainty was more death. When the guns finally fell silent after an unbrokered ceasefire in August 1988, there was no victory parade, no resolution, only a profound sense of exhaustion and loss. After 8 years of unimaginable bloodshed, nothing had fundamentally changed. The borders remained exactly where they were before the invasion. Saddam Hussein was still in power in Baghdad, and the Islamic Republic was still firmly in control in Tehran. The ideological chasm between them had not closed. It had widened into an abyss of mutual hatred, solidified by years of propaganda and the shared trauma of 1 million deaths. The war ended not with a peace treaty, but with a reluctant pause, leaving two shattered nations nursing deep wounds and a burning desire for revenge. The true, lasting legacy of the Iran-Iraq War began to unfold almost as soon as the fighting stopped. The conflict didn't just end, it metastasized, transforming the political landscape of the entire Middle East. Saddled with a colossal war debt and a massive, battle-hardened army with nothing to do, Saddam Hussein desperately needed a financial windfall. Just 2 years after the ceasefire with Iran, he turned his sights on his wealthy southern neighbor, invading Kuwait in 1990. This act, a direct consequence of the economic ruin from the war with Iran, triggered the First Gulf War and set Saddam on a collision course with the United States. This path would ultimately lead to the 2003 invasion of Iraq, an event that toppled Saddam's regime and created a massive power vacuum. And who was best positioned to fill that vacuum? The very nation that had failed to defeat Saddam on the battlefield, Iran. The fall of Saddam, Iran's bitterest enemy, was the greatest strategic gift Tehran could have ever hoped for. In the years following 2003, Iran achieved through political influence what it could not through 8 years of brutal warfare. It cultivated deep ties with Iraq's new Shia-led government and sponsored powerful militias that now operate as a state within a state. Today, the Iranian influence that Saddam fought so hard to prevent is a dominant reality in Iraqi politics and security. The war didn't just fail to contain Iran, it inadvertently paved the way for its regional ascendancy. The sectarian divisions that Saddam had exploited and that the war had inflamed were carved permanently into the fabric of Iraqi society, fueling cycles of civil war and insurgency that continue to this day. The conflict between Sunni and Shia, weaponized by both sides during the war, became the defining fault line of the modern Middle East. The Cold War now playing out between Iran and Saudi Arabia across the proxy battlefields of Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen is a direct continuation of the ideological and geopolitical dynamics born in the trenches of the 1980s. Understanding the Iran-Iraq War is not just about understanding a historical event. It is essential to comprehending the DNA of nearly every major conflict shaping the Middle East today. The guns may have fallen silent in 1988, but the war never really ended. It simply transformed into the region's permanent, devastating condition.